Hello and welcome to the walk-off. This is a waiting game. They're going to need to make sure that the teams that they're dealing with are prepared to give stuff up at the price that they should be paying. Right? So they might prefer to just wait and hold on for 2 more weeks and get a guy at the price they should get him for than overpay for him to get him now. But we'll see what happens. Um, Speaking of that, I did want to talk expanded playoffs here real quickly, which is one of the reasons why we're going to need to wait till much closer to the trade deadline to see things happen, is that there are more teams involved in the wild card race.
Sure.
That said, I'm a little disappointed in the way that this whole thing has played out. It was really touted when the CBA was amended that the reason they're expanding playoffs is to encourage more competition amongst these middling teams that some may feel inclined to rebuild rather than continue to try and win. But it hasn't really played out that way. 7 of 15 teams in the AL East are over 500. So not even half the teams are over 500 in the American League, 8 of 15 in the NL. So 15 out of 30 teams, half the teams are even above 500.
Isn't that kind of just the math of it, though? Like,
I
sorry to push
guess.
back on you, but
No.
isn't that just like the definition of 500 in a way? And I know there are ways that it can be different than that, but how many times in a season are 20 teams above 500 any
I
given
think
year? Like
I
500 just
think
means half, right?
Yeah, but I think what MLB was hoping would happen is that the disparity would be a little bit smaller. Like the 10 bottom teams would get beat up on, and those 10 middle teams would have a better record and be able to continue to try and compete. It hasn't really played out that way. I mean, you do make a good
Look,
point.
I'm going
Obviously,
to
if
take the
there's
opposite side on this for sure. Like, I think, if anything, this shows that, like, maybe the bottom teams aren't as bad as, like, maybe that's where the parity is taking place, is instead of at the top of it, it's taking place at the bottom of it. I mean, you don't want parity among the Pirates, Cincinnati Reds, and
no,
start
that's
bragging
true.
about, look at the parity we've got in Oakland here. But I think that wins and losses record, I don't know, man. I think we're going to see that parity come the trade deadline, right? I think that's where the expanded playoffs is going to have its effect, because right now, if I'm looking at this AL, I got to go pretty far down the list to find a team who's not going to be a buyer at the deadline. I got to go 10 teams deep right
Well,
now. It's
through
look, here's our list of playoff competitive teams, where I would say if you're a fan in this market, you expect your team to spend and make a push. You got the Yankees, Houston, Toronto, Boston, Cleveland, Minnesota, Tampa, Chicago, obviously. But then you got the Rangers, 2 games below 500. They're only 4.5 out of that last wild card spot. The LA Angels, I mean, they had that horrific slide, but that's a team that should
mhm,
be competing and making a push. Beyond that, you've only
mhm.
got Baltimore, Seattle, Detroit, Kansas, and Oakland. The NL isn't any different. Like,
Well, I guess my problem was I was really hoping that the 3 wild card spots, there would be 3 or 4 teams below them truly competing, and it doesn't feel that way. Um, I'm not
I
discounting what you're saying.
I don't know what, like, because we're talking about the Jays making a desperation move early, right? Like, in theory, that's the point of the season we're at, June 24th, where to make a trade right now, to jump out in front of the market or whatever, and potentially overpaying to get a bullpen arm or to get a starting pitcher or that lefty bat or whatever, right?
Hmm.
That's it for everybody. Like, nobody is out there making moves, so I don't really know what we would expect to see out of the LA Angels right now. Like, they kind of just have to bide time, figure out, and like survive for another month, and then it's okay. Now let's go in. Like, now we're 2 games out of a wild spot. Let's make that push. So I think that'll be the more telling time frame to look at.
And you're right. You're right. The larger sample side is important here before we truly judge whether this worked or not. I am curious what you think, though. Right now, it looks like there's 6 teams. So I think it's the Athletics, the Reds, the Nationals, the Royals, the Cubs, and the Tigers are all on pace to lose more than 100 games. Is that too many teams losing 100 games, dude? In your opinion?
The, this is where, again, I got to push back on you. You just started this conversation with you were hoping that the bottom teams would get beat up on. That's the bottom teams getting beat up on. I guess. I don't know.
No.
I would say, yeah, set the bottom 6 on fire. Let's have 24 good teams fighting it out for 16 playoff spots. That's my
No,
dream
and that's
world.
Yeah, no, I was too. I guess it's just the middle section of the league isn't as good as I was hoping it would be.
But
But
look at
maybe
any
you're right.
league, man. Look at the NHL. Look at, like, any league. Like, the middle 15 teams are going to be the middle 15 teams. Like, we're not going to have like, there's no playoff format that creates like 15 teams that are the New York
Yeah.
Yankees and the LA Dodgers. Like, that's
Well,
never going to
it can't be
happen.
done. Absolutely. And that is not what I was trying to get at here. But yes, I do agree with you
I don't
on
know.
that
Like,
aspect.
I'm looking at the Chicago White Sox, right? Like, they just took 2 out of 3 against us. They are definition of a middle of the pack team in the AL East. They're 33-35. This is a team that has been cannibalized by bad tacos and injuries all year
Hmm.
long. What else do you want? Like, if you're honestly a Chicago White Sox fan, what else can you do other than, like, cross your fingers, hope that they, like, get healthy, and then make, like, 1 or 2 moves at the deadline? Like, there's this is the team you have at this point. It's not from lack of
Hmm.
spending. It's not from lack of, like,
Yeah.
development or anything, right? Like, they've got the guys, they've got the pieces in place. Maybe you fire the manager, but other
Yeah.
than that, like, this is a tough luck team who's still right in the thick of it. They're four and a
You
half
know what?
games out of a wild card spot. I I mean, that's the
That's
quintessential
the best
team who
that's the best
3
point you
years
could have
ago
made.
maybe is selling it, right? Like, maybe 3 years ago, or you go back to where there was 4 playoff teams, or the coin toss 1 game playoff wild card. Maybe the White Sox in that situation are going, we're way too far back. If we don't catch the
Hmm.
Twins or the Guardians or whoever, there's no, like, we have no shot at hell. So we might as well sell off and try and rebuild.
That is a point that I will give you. That's the best point you've made. Where I just yeah.
I win.
I mean, the White Sox spending, the
Yeah.
Angels are spending. No, you're right. You're right. Like, there are teams in that middle pack that are trying to win, and they're just bad management. And I mean, that happens in every league. I don't know. I don't know why it bothers me. I guess it's just I'm an old man who didn't even want the playoffs expanded, and
I
it
know,
just feels
man.
like it's not working. But you're right. It is what it is. Like, and it truly can't be judged until the end of the season. So I
I,
guess
here's what I'm honestly, for me, this is where it all kind of starts and ends, is like this trade deadline.
yes.
But again, this is going to be a 1 year sample. We're going to have to see 5 trade deadlines to see how it really shakes out. But I'm expecting fireworks this trade deadline. I think there are
Hmm.
going to be a lot of moves. I mean, I was just watching Blair and Barker before the show, and we were talking about the Jays, right? Jays need
Hmm.
2 bullpen arms. They need a
Yes.
left-handed hitter, and they need a starting pitcher, right? The
Yes.
Jays are not going to be able to go out, get the best starting pitcher on the market, get the top 2 bullpen arms on the market, and get the top left-handed hitter available. Like, they're
No.
not, because there's going
No.
to be teams who, the Boston Red Sox, the Tampa Bay
Yeah.
Rays, the New York Yankees still have room to raise their hand and go, well, we can't just let the Blue Jays take everybody, right? So, like,
Hmm.
Jeff Blair kept saying they're not operating in a vacuum. They can't just go
Yeah.
out, pay whatever a price for these 4 guys and go, okay, well, we fixed all of our holes. Let's move on now, right? Because that's again where this expanded playoffs is going to take place. Like, who saw the Minnesota Twins being a contender for Carlos Correa? You know what I
No,
mean?
it's a
Like,
great point.
so that's where we're going to see teams raise their, like, the Texas Rangers went out and got Marcus Simeon and Seager. Like, the Texas Rangers aren't going to just push their chips in and go, well, we'll try again next year. right?
Good point. Yeah.
So I think be prepared to see the Texas Rangers go out and solve some of their holes and make a big splash at the trade deadline. They're right in it still, you know?
Yeah. It's going to
So,
be an exciting trade deadline for sure. Like there are going to be far more teams competing, and maybe that's going to be the big positive out of this expanded playoffs,
yeah, I think
more
that'll be
so
the
than the
measuring
actual
stick for how
the
this.
records, yeah, than the records of the teams. Absolutely.
So, there's only so many wins to go around, right? Like, it's at the end of
Yes.
the season, if you take everybody's record, the average is 500. By definition, half the games are a win, half the games are a loss.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that we'll see some big splashes at the trade deadline, and I think that'll be the best way to measure who's being, how many teams are really being competitive and going for it. Because again, I do think you don't have to look too far back to look at trade deadlines of yesteryear, and like the New York Yankees running away with it. In previous years, it would feel like, well, why even bother?
Hmm.
You know, why even bother putting your chips in just to lose in the first round to the New York Yankees, anyways?
But then you watch an 88 team win in Atlanta win the World Series last year, and you're like, you know what? Just get there.
Just get there, yeah. And then, I mean, we started the show with 2001, the Seattle Mariners, 116 wins, all-time win record.
Hmm.
Didn't make the World Series.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
The game's still got to be played.
Still got to be played. It's an interesting spot for the Blue Jays to be in because they really do have to decide, is this the year we want to go all in? Is this the year that we want to sell the farm, go and get those pieces? Or do you re-roll it for next year? Right? Do you go, well, let's try and get some more playoff experience, right? Let's be happy making the playoffs. Let's see if we can do some damage with what we got. And then next year we'll push our chips all in. And I don't, how do you feel about that strategy?
I don't like it.
I don't
I,
like it
I,
either because there's always a
I
reason to wait till next year, right?
yes, of
The
course there
Yankees
is.
aren't
Of
going to
course
go
there is.
away. The Red Sox are only going to get better as their, prospects start to get called up. The Rays are going to be the Rays forever. Like there's just always a reason to go, well, let's not go all in quite yet. And then here's the other thing. If the chips were on the other table or foot, I'm mixing my analogies here. If the Blue Jays were on pace for 120 wins
If you're
this year,
kicking the cat down the road, yes, I
kicking
get
the
it.
cat down the road, even then, like if you're just the far and away front runner, you can't just stand pat at the deadline and go, I don't know. It's tough. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It's going to be a wild trade deadline. I'm looking forward to